What up, guys? Joachim here, Joachim the Convert. And in one of the most recent videos that I posted, which has been a little while ago now because I haven't been posting very regularly, but someone was very offended. I would say they were very offended. They made several comments and they seemed to be very upset that I questioned and that I disagreed with, and then I went as far as to say that what Archbishop Elpidiforos had said in a very public, very open forum was contrary to Orthodox teaching. I think I went as far as to say that it was heresy. And I didn't call him a heretic. And I want to make that distinction. That can only be judged by a synod of bishops, where they determine that you are a heretic. I didn't say that. I said that what he was teaching was heresy. And what he was teaching, what he said, and what was posted, what was openly said, there's no debate about what he said. He said that there were a myriad of ways to the top of the mountain in referring to one religion. And he said we should not elevate one religion above another. And many people were very offended by this. Many people spoke out against this. I was one of them. And this person basically said that since I wasn't a bishop, since I wasn't I shouldn't presume to speak for the Orthodox faith. Well, I wasn't the one speaking these things. I was reading from the scripture, and I was pointing out that what he was saying was not only contrary to councils, to saints, to the church fathers, but it was contrary to the scripture itself. So that kind of represents some of the authorities that we have. The scripture is perfect. So if you're contrary to the scripture, then you're contrary to the teaching of the apostles and of the prophets. But I also want to address, however, this concept that Orthodox lay people should not be speaking out or should not be saying things against the bishops and against the anyone that is an authority. This has not been the way that the Orthodox Church has run. This has not been a historical precedence within the Orthodox Church. If you are a layperson and someone, a bishop, a priest, anyone is saying things contrary to the truth, contrary to the way that the Orthodox Church has taught, which is the truth, that is historical Christianity, then you as a layperson have a responsibility to call it out. That is the responsibility that you take when you become an Orthodox Christian. And some people, that happens at birth. They are baptized, maybe a year after birth, but you grow up with this. And if you're a Orthodox person who is a cradle Orthodox, then you really have a greater responsibility. You should be doing these things. So, and a lot of times that's unfortunately not the case. Cradle Orthodox people probably are among those that are at least in America. Now, that's not true in say, Greece and Russia and Romania. But if you're an American, then usually, I think it's usually the Cradle Orthodox people who, are more of this opinion that you need to shut up, keep your head down, and do what you're told. Well, no, that's not the way that Orthodox people have generally done things in the past. That's not the way that the lay people have understood our faith ever at any point in the last 2,000 years. And I want to read a really good article that discusses that right now. And this is discussing Mark of Ephesus, who will be discussed in the article. So if you don't know who he is, then you'll find out as we read this. I think he was, he's Saint Mark. He's a canonized saint. And that this has to do with the uprising of the Orthodox laity. And the article comes from orthodoxreflections.com. And I think this is an important piece of history. And if you are one of these people that thinks that being an Orthodox lay person means that you need to shut your mouth, put your head down, and do whatever the bishop says, then you really need to you really need to consider some of these people like Saint Mark of Ephesus, because there is a historical truth, and if the bishops go contrary to that, if they're teaching contrary to the Orthodox faith, you have a responsibility to call that out. And no, putting your head down, keeping your mouth shut, having silent agreement with what is heresy, then you're a heretic. I'm not declaring that you're a heretic, but I'm just saying that that's what the councils actually state. There is a canon of the church that states that if you pray with heretics, if you agree with heretics, then you are a heretic. So I think when we get into these things, that's what it says. I just think it's important to give it some consideration. And if people are teaching contrary to the faith, then you need to openly disagree with it. And I'm not saying that you need to leave the church. I'm not saying that you need to cause a fight. I'm not saying that you should stop accepting communion. Maybe you do that. I don't know. I don't know what the topic is, because there is a historical precedence for not accepting communion from people that are teaching heresy too. And so I just think that we need to consider this. But most of that will be addressed in this article, so I should definitely just move to reading that now. And I encourage you to listen and consider what is discussed in this article. So St. Mark of Ephesus, 1392 to 1444, lived in times similar to ours. And this is written very recently, within the past year. So when it says times similar to ours, it is discussing times similar to the Orthodox Church in America over the past 2 years. The Orthodox hierarchs were under pressure to modify the Orthodox beliefs at the Council of Florence, 1438 to 1439, in order to secure a short-term advantage. The Orthodox laity, aghast at the betrayal of sacred tradition, rose up in protest and blocked the false ecumenism. The recent activities of Archbishop Elpidophoros and Patriarch Bartholomew bear an unsettling resemblance to the false ecumenism of the Council of Florence and have provoked criticism and opposition among Orthodox laity. In the early 1400s, Constantinople, the capital of the Byzantine Empire, had fallen on hard times. It had been attacked by Western Christians in the Fourth Crusade in 1204, who pillaged and raped the vulnerable Christian city. Then it suffered 5 decades, 1204 to 1261, of Latin rule, during which the laity refused to attend churches served by Roman Catholic priests. When the Byzantines retook Constantinople, it was greatly enfeebled, a shadow of its former self. In contrast, the fortunes of the Roman Catholic West were on the rise with the affluence of the Italian Renaissance and the intellectual vigor of Aristotelian scholasticism. Even with the embittered relations between Catholics and Orthodox, there was a greater threat in the East. The Muslim armies were slowly conquering their way across Asia Minor towards Constantinople. The Byzantines were in desperate need of military assistance from the Catholic West. However, there was a catch. They needed to patch up the differences with the Catholic Church. An Orthodox delegation comprised of the Patriarch of Constantinople, the Byzantine Emperor, and other Orthodox hierarchs sailed to the Reunion Council at Florence. When the two sides met, it became apparent that they had drifted apart in matters of doctrine, worship practice, and theological method. The delegates clashed on the legitimacy of the Filioque clause in the Nicene Creed, the Catholics' use of azimus, or unleavened bread, and their practice of serving communion in one kind to the laity, bread, that is, without wine, the teaching on purgatory, and the mandatory celibacy for Catholic priests. The differences were aggravated by differences in theological method. Where the Orthodox continued to rely on patristic sources, Catholics relied heavily on syllogistic style of argumentation favored in Thomist scholasticism. Overarching all these was Rome's claim to papal supremacy. Being under considerable pressure, the majority of the Orthodox delegation made outright and implicit concessions to the Catholics and affixed their signature to the decree of union. The one holdout was Mark of Ephesus. When the delegation returned to Constantinople, they were met by a populace that was outraged that their hierarchs had yielded to the Roman Catholics. The people of Constantinople from the beginning sided with Mark of Ephesus. The pro-unionists found themselves in the minority. The laity shunned the churches where pro-union priests celebrated the liturgy. Those who went to pro-union churches, even out of curiosity, found themselves ostracized. Mark of Ephesus led the anti-unionist forces until his death in 1444. In the face of ferocious lay opposition, the majority of hierarchs quickly repudiated their signing of the reunion documents. The remaining pro-union bishops fled to Rome. I think this is a very important part. I'm sorry, I'm not reading from the article obviously now, but I think this is a very important part to see that the hierarchs were forced to acknowledge that what they did was wrong and to repudiate it because of Orthodox laity. It was the laity who led the opposition to this, and the hierarchs had to cave because of Orthodox laity. So that there should be acknowledged that there is an authority, a power that exists within the lay people in Orthodoxy. That is what I see from this, at least this one example. And this isn't the only example of this happening, but I think it's the most relevant to a discussion on this topic. So continuing in the article. In time, the Council of Florence would be rejected by wider Orthodoxy. By the Synod of Moscow in 1441, the Synod of Jerusalem in 1443, in the Apology of the Clergy of Constantinople in 1443, and the Synod of Constantinople in 1448. In addition, Florence was condemned through the special acts of the churches of Moldavia and Moldavlakia, and Serbia and Iberia. Thus, the repudiation of Florence by the Orthodox laity in Constantinople was later ratified by Orthodox hierarchy in various church councils. In this way, the whole of the Orthodox Church repudiated the false union of Florence. The stature of Mark of Ephesus is such that his encyclical is listed among the major doctrinal statements of the Orthodox Church. Western Christianity today is in the crisis. The Episcopal Church, like many mainline Protestant denominations, has succumbed to theological liberalism and has abandoned traditional Christian morality and come to accept the LGBTQ sexual agenda. A similar unraveling has been taking place in Roman Catholicism. Confidence in Roman Catholic clergy has been shaken by reports of rampant sex scandals among priests, bishops, and even cardinals. The Novus Ordo Mass has supplanted the Latin Mass, opening the way for many liturgical innovations. More recently, in 2019, the Vatican allowed the inclusion of the Andean female deity, the Pachamama, in its worship. In the face of the growing disarray in their churches and denominations, many Protestants, evangelicals, and Roman Catholics have sought the safe harbor in Orthodoxy. They have been drawn by its ancient liturgy, its unchanging tradition, and the bravery of its martyrs who died willingly for the true faith. In order to make sense of Archbishop Elpidophoros' recent ecumenical activities, it is proposed that we examine American Orthodoxy not just theologically, but also sociologically. Despite the small but growing stream of converts, Orthodoxy in America is still predominantly ethnic in character. Many of the ethnic parishes struggle with nominalism. This is the problem of people being Orthodox in name only, rarely going to church, but insisting on having an Orthodox wedding or an Orthodox funeral. Many of the descendants of the first-generation immigrants have assimilated into mainstream American society and along the way have abandoned Orthodoxy for the mainline Protestant denominations or Roman Catholicism. This puts pressure on the hierarchs and priests to keep the numbers up. Oftentimes, someone who grew up Orthodox wants to marry someone who is not Orthodox and has no desire to become Orthodox. Rather than the person leave Orthodoxy, the priest will allow for mixed marriages, despite the fact that this is contrary to Orthodoxy. As mixed marriages become widespread, the perception grows that Orthodoxy is just one denomination among many. This leads to awkwardness and tension when people learn of Orthodoxy's claim to be the one true church. A similar awkwardness arises when the priest is obligated to enforce the Orthodox Church's position on closed communion, that only those who are Orthodox may partake of the Eucharist. This puts pressure on the priest and the bishop to downplay Orthodoxy's rigorous, exclusivist stance. Ecumenical engagement by the hierarchs, in which historic doctrinal differences with the non-Orthodox are minimized or even eliminated, can alleviate this awkwardness. Theological relativism makes it easier for the nominal Orthodox and their non-Orthodox spouses and children to participate in parish activities without having to commit to Orthodox doctrines and spiritual disciplines. What is to be noted is that while theological rigor falls by the wayside, the traditional markers of ethnicity are retained. Ethnic festivals, the language of the ethnic homeland, the name ethnic Orthodox Church. Those practical concerns can tempt Orthodox clergy to sell their spiritual birthright for short-term benefits of ecumenism with the heterodox. Another possibility to consider is that closer ties with the two major American denominations can give Constantinople a geopolitical advantage in its rivalry against the Patriarch of Moscow. While Archbishop Elpidophoros heads the largest Orthodox jurisdiction in the U.S., the fact remains that Orthodoxy is a tiny fish in a huge lake. Closer ties with the Episcopal Church and the Roman Catholic Church would enhance the Orthodox Church's political influence. Elpidophoros' superior, Patriarch Bartholomew, like Byzantine Emperor John VIII, who initiated the failed Council of Florence, finds himself surrounded and beleaguered by hostile forces. The Patriarch of Constantinople, after years of decline, finds itself confined to a few blocks in the predominantly Muslim city of Istanbul, Turkey. It was only last year, 2020, that the Turkish state converted Hagia Sophia into a mosque over Patriarch Bartholomew's feeble protests. In 2019, in an impetuous exercise of quasi-papal power, Bartholomew unilaterally issued a tomos granting autocephaly to the Orthodox Church of Ukraine, leading to ruptured relations with Moscow. Currying the favor and goodwill of the United States can give Constantinople an added advantage against Moscow. Conversely, Constantinople's rivalry with the Patriarch of Moscow over Ukraine provides an opportunity to be exploited by the United States as part of its great game against Russia. And so that concludes that part of the article. I think there's a little bit more here to go over. So hopefully he sums some of these up. I'll have some ideas or some thoughts at the end, but I'll finish reading the article. So lessons for today. The Council of Florence fiasco yields lessons that apply to today's situation. Yiannakopoulos notes that the failure of the Council of Florence can be attributed to the fact that union between Catholicism and Orthodoxy is viewed as a means to political ends, while religious sincerity was overlooked. Also overlooked was the formative impact of the Latin occupation of Constantinople following the Fourth Crusade. The Orthodox laity remembered vividly life under papal rule, and so their fear and hostility to Roman Catholicism was very real and existential. It seems that Patriarch Bartholomew and Archbishop Elpidophoros have forgotten the lessons of Florence. They are fixated on the short-term benefits from rapprochement with the West. They fail to take into account the experience of the recent converts to Orthodoxy who converted out of religious sincerity, not with an expectation of material gain. The converts know from firsthand experience the problems of Western Christianity, its deviant teachings. It is no surprise, then, that they are deeply distressed by the false ecumenism being espoused by the hierarchs. It is supposed to be today's Orthodox laity will take a stand for... It is hoped that today's Orthodox laity will take a stand for Holy Orthodoxy, as did St. Mark of Ephesus and the laity of Constantinople. The last part of the article is entitled The Danger of Complicit Silence, and I think that this speaks a lot to what I was addressing at the beginning of this video. In the 1400s, the threat to orthodoxy came from the outside. Today, the threat is coming from within. from our hierarchs who are promoting false ecumenism by means of stealth and creeping change. This stealth strategy has proven to be effective in mainline Protestantism and also in Roman Catholicism. It worked because most people are reluctant to stand up vocally to their church leadership. In addition, there is the fear of losing friends or employment. Another danger is complacency. This is the attitude of smug satisfaction with the present situation or a reluctance to face up to the fact that there is a crisis. In present circumstances, quiet passivity will be taken as endorsement. It will then be interpreted by the hierarchs as license to take more flagrant steps away from holy tradition. We are in a situation similar to an apartment complex where there is a burning odor in the air. People ought to be pulling out the fire alarm or at least knocking on their neighbors' doors asking if they smell something funny. The time has come for the laity to raise the alarm, to call out fire. Express to your priest your concerns about this false ecumenism and ask if he plans to voice his concern with others. Contact your Orthodox friends and let them know your concerns. Let us work together and mobilize to block this false ecumenism, just as the Orthodox laity did in the time of Mark of Ephesus. If enough Orthodox laity take a stand for holy tradition, we can help restore stability to our Holy Mother Church. And that was by Robert Arakaki. I'm not sure how to pronounce his last name. Arakaki. Master of Arts in Church History, PhD in Political Science, Asian American convert to Orthodoxy, and it was originally published at Handwritings on the Wall. And I think it really speaks historically and just in general as far as the Orthodox teaching on this. And I think I've read a few articles from this website. You can see a few of them down here at the bottom. Really address some of these recent issues as well. But the big thing that I wanted to express in this article, overarching more than anything, is that as an Orthodox Christian, there is a responsibility on your part to not be silent, to not put your head down, keep your mouth shut, and just do whatever the bishop says. There is a responsibility on your part to consider if your bishop is standing for the truth. And if they're not, there is a responsibility on your part to call it out and not to agree with it. And that's really all I wanted to say. I hope that in sharing this article and this video, I have shown that this has been traditionally the way that Orthodoxy has worked, that the lay people have really driven a lot of the truth and standing and holding to those ancient traditions. And that should be our goal. Our goal should not be to accept modernism no matter what the case is. And if something is false, then it's false, and we're not accepting it. So you guys take it easy. I will talk to you in another video coming soon. I hope you are well and blessed, and may God have mercy and forgive us.